Hi, everybody. I'm on partial vacation, so there will not be a hangout tonight. Sorry about that, but I'm doing a bit of a staycation where I'm posting interviews every day. So I'm kind of working, but I'm not doing the full rest of my work daily and weekly. And I'm staying home and trying to do things I don't normally do and not spend too much money. And so tomorrow I head down to West Virginia to give my annual talk to young people who are interested in environmentalism and sustainability. That'd be particularly challenging this year, but I'm always excited to be around Gen Zers and anyone younger, significantly younger than me, almost 50. But other than that, I'm chilling and I am hanging out. So I appreciate you giving me a little bit of a break this week from the news segment and much of the rest of the other work I do. I will be continuing to bring these conversations, though, like this one today with Michael Cohen, who I absolutely love. We had a great conversation, Michael and I. You should follow him at truthandconsequences.substack.com. And he's got a new piece over at MSNBC as well about the big, bad, beautiful bill that should have passed by the time you get this podcast, unfortunately, this episode, because it's happening right now. And I say unfortunately, meaning that it passed, because it's a horror show. It's a evil, awful, terrible thing that Republicans have done. I wrote a little something that I want to read. I posted it on Facebook, and maybe I'll post it up on Substack. I'm not much of a great writer, that's for sure. I just like to ramble on and talk. But I'm just outraged, really outraged by this, as I'm sure you are. What I wrote was, my outrage today is dedicated to those who do not believe healthcare should be a human right in America, the way it is everywhere else, especially if you call yourself religious. I think that if you sit at home, look at porn, play video games, and eat crappy food, I still believe you should get access to healthcare. If you do all these things and you're also an asshole on top of it, I still think you should get healthcare. I think that because I think all humans should have access to basic health insurance and health care, especially in the richest country in the world. Of course, we can't afford premium health services for everyone who wants or needs it. But basic access to preventative care, treatments, and drugs that keep people healthy and out of suffering should be a human right. It should just be a human right. The fact that most Americans are convinced that you have to have, quote, skin in the game and have to work a certain amount of hours a week to be eligible for government health insurance is so awful, so inhuman. And anyone who sees themselves as a virtuous or good or religious person should know that you got some work to do. What this rigged capitalism and especially this Republican Party behind it have done to healthcare in this country is such a travesty. Taking healthcare from people regardless of their employment status or not given to them in the first place is grotesque. And you know what else it is? Uniquely American. That's what I wrote. If you want to share it, if you want to argue with it, if you want to add to it, I look forward to hearing from you. You can comment or we can talk about it in all the other venues and places that we talk. Again, sorry I won't see you tonight, and thanks for the time off a little bit this week. Still here posting these conversations. This one with Michael Cohen I think is great. We covered a lot of ground, and you should go subscribe to his Substack. Follow him on Twitter if you're still over there, on Blue Sky as well. Get his books and read them at msnbc.com. And not Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, of course. No, Michael Cohen has been joining me for years now, who is a senior fellow at the Strategic Studies at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. He's a columnist for MSNBC and the Daily Beast, former Boston Globe columnist, author, and at one point a speechwriter at the State Department, I believe. No, that Michael Cohen, much smarter. Let's do it. You know, a lot of people left Twitter because Elon Musk is an anti-Semite, but not you.
That's true, actually. I think he's a nice Semite, but I actually think he's just a very sick, sad individual.
You think he's just sick and sad?
I mean, he's an anti-Semite, but I think he's a very sick and sad individual.
I had a thought. Welcome, everybody. Michael Cohen is joining me. And if you're not already subscribing to his Substack, you should. It's great. He also just wrote a piece for MSNBC.com where he's a contributor about Trump's big, bad, beautiful bill, which we're going to talk about. But just real quick on Elon and the dispute between he and Trump, it's like, what do you think that it feels like that guy also, like Trump, doesn't think about long-term strategy, which is weird because he's got these successful companies that he runs. But in terms of politics and him going all in for Trump, like, why support the guy who's going to end the subsidies to your car companies, or do they not care about those subsidies?
Oh, no. He saw that as a positive because he would hurt his competitors and leave. He thought it would actually hurt them more and give him more market share. So actually, he wanted those subsidies to go away.
So then why is he, do you think he's genuinely griping about the debt and deficit that the bill creates? Do you think he's genuinely concerned about that?
No. I think he's just, I think that he is hurt by Trump sort of turning his back on him, and he wants to get back at him. I don't think that people like Musk believe much of anything, I guess, except for having lots of kids and procreating. Procreating is the one thing he's. I think he's motivated by that whole woke mind virus idea that he seems to be behind that phrase. I don't know who came up. Yeah, but I don't know how that feels like something that he could very easily walk away from under the right circumstances, or that he could change his mind about. I don't feel like he has really clear views. I think he's someone driven more by his sort of personal angst and his personal kind of issues than he is about anything particularly policy or policy oriented. I don't think that's what he thinks about. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but I get the impression of somebody who he kind of puts his finger up in the wind and decides what he believes in a given moment, and it had a lot to do with how he feels about certain individuals or how he feels about criticisms of him.
We'll come back to maybe Musk when we talk about the bill that you've written a lot about, but I want to ask you about a couple of other things. First, real quick, yesterday, our Mad King with his Department of Homeland Security and other stormtroopers went to Florida, where they toured a prison in a swamp that looks pretty primitive and that is there to house about 5,000 undocumented people, apparently. And they were smiling in pictures and laughing. But I just wanted to ask you about that because you put out a couple tweets, and I think it's really important that we always remind people the simple idea. It does seem to be that cruelty is the point, and those supporting Trump seem to be somewhat inspired and motivated by that cruelty. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one thing that I've been struck by is that you read these stories, these horrible stories. People have lived here for 20 years. People came here as children. I wrote a story a couple months ago about a girl, a woman. She's 19. I guess at my age, it seems like a girl, but actually she's an adult. She came here when she was 4 years old from Mexico illegally. Her parents are here; they're undocumented, and she was pulled over, as it turned out, incorrectly by police in Florida, and was turned over to ICE. And I wrote this piece about this is a girl who's been here since she was 4 years old. She doesn't know anything of her home country, doesn't remember anything about Mexico. I talked to her lawyer who said to me she's as American as my kids, right? I mean, she's the Southern twang. This is a kid who's going to college, who's a star on our cross country team. And I said, look, why wouldn't you want somebody like this in America, right? I mean, this is somebody like you hear a lot of complaints of people who criticize immigration and say, oh, they don't integrate into the country. Well, she did. She very much did, as did her parents. Her father owned a business. And so what I was struck by was not just like, sort of the weirdness in saying this is not somebody you want in America, but the responses that I got from sort of MAGA folks who just were cheering what happened to her, spiking the football on this woman's plate. And I thought to myself, like, what is the matter with you? What causes you to go onto a social media site and attack a woman you've never met, a girl whose life and her whatever she's doing doesn't affect you in the slightest, and cheer for her removal from America to a country she's like really has no memory of and has never lived in? And I just think that there's something about performative about it, but it's also like, people have signed on to Trump's cruelty, and in the sense they want to, it's hard for them to walk away from that. So they almost like double down on it. But I think because of the cruelty that's going on, because of the need for people to support Trump, unabashedly support him, I think they sort of bought into this idea that all immigrants are terrible and they're all criminals, which of course is not true, and they're all bad, which of course is not true. So I think there's a certain psychology that's driving this that is kind of sick. And I think also the people in charge who are driving this are, I don't think Trump has really. It's funny. There was a piece a couple weeks ago about how Stephen Miller, who I think is the person really driving this, that even Trump mocked him in private for being too excited about all these deportations.
Really?
And I think, this is Stephen Miller's policy. And I think if you look at some of the stuff Stephen Miller has said, if you look at some of how the policy is being implemented, employers are not being targeted. Employers who employ undocumented immigrants are not being targeted, even though that's a crime. They are targeting the immigrants themselves. And I think we just should call this what it really is, which is sort of almost like benign ethnic cleansing. And I say that in complete sincerity because I think that's what's happening. Now, I don't want to say it's fully ethnic cleansing because we're not talking about deporting people who are here as legal citizens, although maybe that's the next process, who knows. But this very much, appears to be a process that is focused around deporting as many non-white people as possible. And I don't know how you don't call that ethnic cleansing. Or again, it's not as severe as that, but it's like a benign version of it almost.
I mean, those words, just you need to take a pause on them.
You do. I interrupt you, but like I wrote something on Twitter where I said that, and then I deleted it because I was like, I don't know if I really want to say that. But the more I think about it, the more I think we need to talk about it in that context.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really powerful two words to put next to each other, and when we use them, someone like you at least, then we should take seriously what it means. But I also think sometimes people on social media just do it just to entertain themselves, just to be a dick. But then, just in case they were being that way, real people with their real accounts in my community, where I live in Clarkstown, New York, and Rockland County, just north of the city, under their own names, they say similar things about undocumented people who are working. And it's wild because many of them I even know literally, and I know that they've had them in their house or at least on their lawn taking care of things they can't or don't want to pay.
Or don't want to do, right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's preposterous and it's gross and it's disgusting, but it is the point. And I didn't see that reporting about Trump's going after Stephen Miller, but now he's been told by his ag secretary and others in his administration, you can't deport everybody. Most of these people, unbeknownst to you, are working important jobs. The underpinning of what we called essential workers during COVID.
But did you notice that after he basically backtracked and said we shouldn't be deporting people who work in the hotel industry or work in agriculture, that they reversed that policy like a few days later, and it was driven by Miller because Stephen Miller is our unofficial president because he's the one who's driving this policy. There's no question about it.
He certainly is one of the most influential, if not the most influential on this issue, much less many others. I don't know if I want to call him unofficial president because I don't know that he's brought in on every single thing that Trump.
He is. And I think if you go back and read the Signal Chat discussion on Yemen a couple of months ago, who shut down that conversation was Stephen Miller. Well,
what about tariffs? Where's Stephen Miller on that?
On what?
Tariffs, trade policy.
I guess maybe in that he is not as involved, but I imagine. But then again, he probably is somewhat involved in it. I mean, I think that he's got his fingerprints on a lot of issues going on at the White House. I think he's more powerful than Susan Wiles, who's the chief of staff. I think he has more influence on policy than pretty much anybody else. And when you have a president who is so unbelievably clueless about what's happening in his own administration, it gives someone like Miller just outsized power. And I think he has outsized power.
What about the issue, just sticking with the immigration issue and the idea of deporting all these people who are essential workers? Do economists ever consider what would happen to the economy if a whole bunch of essential employees and workers were kicked off the job or out of the country? I feel like it's not something that gets talked about in economics in general because it's not a policy that any country would ever do to itself. Like, we're doing this to ourselves. And I just don't know how big of a deal it is.
But I don't. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, I guess when I see strawberries and produce at the grocery store costing a lot more, it could be directly related to that, or it just not being there. Or if you hear issues with restaurants or hotels or other places shutting down, you've heard some small businesses, landscapers and so on, home builders and contractors being concerned about this. But until it affects the average American, and then you correlate that to these people, will they necessarily care? But I would imagine economists don't really consider this because this is such a foreign idea for a nation's leader to do.
No, well, look, I think that some economists have talked about it, but I also think you don't need to be an economist to figure this one out. I mean, if you deport lots of people who work in agriculture, or they're afraid to go to work, what's the effect going to be? You're going to produce less food, or you're going to have to hire people who have to pay higher wages to, and that's going to lead to higher costs being passed on to consumers. I don't think it's even not all that complicated. If you can't find undocumented workers to do construction work, and you have to pay people, or you have to cancel projects, or you have to pay more, then that's going to end up costing more money for the price of housing. So I think, I've actually been surprised we haven't seen more of an economic effect from these policies, but I think it's just a matter of time. You can't take this many people out of the economy who work in industries that are reliant on low wage workers to keep costs low and expect that you're not going to see some impact, down the supply chain and then on to consumers.
See, that's what I'm wondering. When are we going to see an impact of the stupid self-inflicted wounds, from tariffs to this immigration issue to the bill that gets passed?
You're already seeing something. And there was a piece I read today in Axios that points out that you're already seeing some of this on a not as somewhat modest level, a decrease in growth that it's coming because of these deportations. But I expect the problem will get worse. I mean, look, I was talking to somebody about this who works in landscaping and in New York, and they said, look, right now we haven't dealt with this issue very much. ICE has not really showed up here. What if they do? Does that begin to affect costs here? I know in LA, you talk to people out in LA, they'll say the impact is dramatic. There's a big article in the Post of the Times, I think, over the weekend that pointed out that you're just seeing people are not going to work, or they're staying home. Cultural festivals that people would go to in the past are now being shut down, or no one's showing up to them because people are afraid of these ICE raids. So I do think that it has an impact. I don't know that it may take a while before it's felt, but I don't see any way possible that you don't see an impact from this. Plus, by the way, if you stop bringing in people into the country, if people stop coming into the country who are undocumented, it's going to have an effect on down the road as far as the ability to hire people to do these jobs. I mean, there's just no way it's not going to have an impact at some point.
Two other things I want to ask before I get to the big, bad, beautiful bill that just passed out of the Senate that you've written a lot about and talked a lot about. And first, it's the Middle East and what happened with the, quote, 12-day war. This is the way I put it to the stand-up community at our hangout Monday night. I was like, listen, let's just chalk this up to an amazing win for Trump because of the narrative that he creates. I often look at the narrative that he creates and how and why people buy it. And, the narrative I said was, listen, he didn't want to bomb Iran, but Netanyahu did it. Trump rode the tiger. He knew the planes weren't going to get shot down because they had no air defenses left. He sent a couple B-2 bombers. They shot a couple missiles in the mountain. Doesn't matter whether or not they hurt their capabilities or not. He came out and called a ceasefire, said everybody's going to have peace. He let them shoot at our bases, called it the 12-day war. Boom, perfect Trump narrative, packaged it right up, and that's how it'll be seen. Nobel Prize, baby.
Well, maybe not the Nobel part. Look, I don't know that the political impact of this is all that significant. I don't also know that the military impact is much significant either. We just don't know. I've seen very conflicting reports on how much damage was done. The thing I will say is that you cannot trust anything this administration says about it. You can't, because they're going to say it was a success even if it wasn't, right? They lie so readily and they lie so frequently that it's impossible to know what to believe.
Yeah.
I also think that it's not a big boost for Trump because it actually ended so quickly, and it's so uncertain as to whether it was a success or not. Plus, I think a lot of people in his coalition didn't support it. This was not a broadly popular move that Trump did. People didn't want to go to war in Iraq. I mean, I think I will say this. I mean, some of the hysteria on the left and even on the right too about, oh, this is like Iraq 2.0. It was so ridiculous. It was so ridiculous. This was not anything like Iraq. The comparisons were just ignorant.
I will absolutely agree with that, having covered so much of that as long as we are not sending American troops into a country, we should not be making these comparisons.
And overthrowing their regime, yes. Yeah. It's not even remotely comparable. It's just stupid. And people have got to get over this.
Serious people that I respect making that argument.
Yeah, people I respect too making. I couldn't believe it.
Another quagmire in the Middle East type thing, yeah.
Yeah, no, ridiculous.
Okay, let me ask you one more big question before we get to the big bad bill. And everybody should read Michael's piece at MSNBC and subscribe to his Substack, Truth and Consequences. But it's about Mamdani. 2 questions. How do you view him right now as someone who has been concerned about his thoughts and views on Jewish people and Israel? You've said some things. You've had a very nuanced take at a recent piece, I thought, which was helpful to understand your view and the view of a lot of other New Yorkers and Jewish people, the Jewish diaspora around the world, on this guy and what he means. And where his support is coming from or not coming from with people who are Jewish.
So one of the things I said about this was, first of all, my biggest criticism of Mamdani is that he's not qualified to be mayor. He simply doesn't have the experience to run the city. I continue to believe that. I think he sold New Yorkers a bill of goods about what he wants to accomplish, most of which he will not be able to accomplish. And if you see the reaction from Hochul, the governor, and from Democrats in Albany, they're just not going to go along with what he wants to do. They're not going to raise taxes.
New York City government can't do a lot without the New York State government.
Yeah, he needs the New York State government to raise taxes to pay for the things he wants to do, and they're not going to raise taxes for him, and they're not going to support him. And frankly, the more he is attacked, which he will be for the next 5 months by Eric Adams and by Republicans, and the worse his numbers get, the more of an outlier he seems, the more he's portrayed as an extremist, the less likely the Democrats are to work with him. So I think he's not going to be a successful mayor. I think he's going to be a disastrously bad mayor. That's my overall take. On the issue of his the anti-Semitism and the anti-Zionism stuff, look, what I wrote was, before the election, I just said I think this guy who wants to be mayor of the largest Jewish diaspora in the world needs to show a little bit more outreach and empathy toward the Jewish community. And he just refused to do it. He simply refused to do it. Refusing to condemn a phrase like globalized intifada, which people like me and a lot of other Jews in New York means attacking Jews, diaspora Jews, was pretty troubling that he wouldn't condemn it. Since the election, but I wrote in that piece right after, I said, look, maybe he did this because he convinced himself that he couldn't afford to piss off his anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic supporters. And so he was going to, wait till after the election to say something. He hasn't. He didn't. He was asked again to condemn that phrase. He still refuses to do it. I'm sure you know the story of the woman in Boulder, Holocaust survivor, who died from her burns suffered from an anti-Semitic attack. And he, expressed sympathy for her loss, but refused to say this was an anti-Semitic hate crime. It's like saying all lives matter during the George Floyd protests. It's incredibly, it's first of all, it's purposeful, right? He knows what he's doing, or social media knows what they're doing. And it's quite hurtful, frankly.
So I'm sure you saw his 3 minutes or so response to Stephen Colbert on the CBS Late Show a couple days before the election.
I did, and I'll tell you something about that.
Let me make my pithy joke.
Sorry.
I, as a non-Jew and an anti-Semite, I was satisfied with what he said. He mentioned actual anti-Semitic things, including, I think, Colorado and Washington murder. He mentioned those, and then he used quotes, and he then offered a solution, a policy idea. How come you're not satisfied with that? And I am.
Because when a politician says, I support, and what he said, I support more money for, fighting against anti-Semitic hate crimes, that to me is a bullshit diversion from trying to actually be a leader.
To be clear,
a leader would have said, I understand the concerns of Jewish New Yorkers, and I am here listening to them. And when they say that globalized intifada is an expression that makes them afraid and which has been used to justify violence like in Boulder and like in D.C., I understand that, and I condemn it, even though I support a Palestinian state. I personally, Michael Cohen, support a Palestinian state. I find globalized the Intifada to be fucking offensive. Offensive to me, offensive to Jews all over America. He won't show that leadership. And why? Because he doesn't want to piss off his supporters who find that language appealing. That's the bottom line. So don't talk to me about how you're going to spend money on shit when you, as the mayor, won't show personal leadership on this issue. So I found the Colbert thing actually more offensive.
Oh. Well, he did say during the Colbert thing, clearly it's not satisfying to you, but he talked about the serious spike in anti-Semitism, cited 2 actual anti-Semitic attacks, and then offered a solution. But because he doesn't condemn that phrase, it's not good enough.
No, actually, he didn't say, for example, that the vast majority of those anti-Semitic attacks, like in New York City, are coming not from the right, not from neo-Nazi groups, but from the left. And if you want to get really clear about it, the primary instigators of anti-Semitic violence in New York are black New Yorkers. That's the fact. He won't say that because it'll piss off his constituents to admit that. But that's the truth. You see this constantly in New York, Orthodox Jews being attacked, and often by individuals who are members of other minority groups, not right-wingers. That's what needs to be said. That's actual leadership, which, by the way, Eric Adams didn't show either. That's what needs to be said, but he won't do it. And so I don't want to hear about how you're going to spend more money on dealing with, for anti-hate crime programming. Spare me. You need to show some leadership, and he won't do it. And so I'm not going to vote for him. And he's not going to change his mind. He clearly believes this. You know, when you say you don't recognize Israel as a Jewish state or the right to Jews to have a Jewish state, that's anti-Zionist. To me, that's anti-Semitic as well. Okay, that's my personal view. And for someone like me who takes my relationship with Israel very seriously, I find it offensive.
I found that to be Freudian. I think you have allegiance to Israel.
That's right. That's right. Dual loyalty. There you go. You got it.
All right. Well, I could fight with you on all of that, but I don't think that it'll make any difference to you or to anybody watching. And I do want to talk about, with the last few minutes here, about something that affects all of us a great deal and probably the most important development. Although I try to think about how the issues I cover, the impact that they have on the most people, which is why I don't talk about the Jews. And
also, you don't like them. Let's be honest.
Listen, long pause for left. This is how I say it. I don't like religion, but of the 3 majors, I prefer Judaism.
You understand that being Jewish is not part of being. It's a religion. It's a
Hold on,
nation
I'm not
of
done.
people. Okay, sorry. I cut your joke off. I'm so sorry.
And I was done, and then I decided I didn't want you to defend it. Of the three major religions, I prefer Judaism. I don't like any religion in its most fundamental form, including Orthodox and Hasidic and a lot of the things. We could talk about that. But I'll make a compliment that's very topical for you to the secular Jew, which is this. I used to think that the Jews sending their kids to camp, as you just did, was like ridiculous, because why have kids and then send them away all summer? But what I realize is the reason why the Jews run the world is because of those camps. They meet each other, they learn how to be independent, they network, and then they rely on each other, and then end up.
I thought you could say because we get to have a month off from our kids.
Oh no,
that's why we're genius.
But here's the thing: my criticism it has become something that I not only do I not criticize, I adapt and adopt, because we sent our kids to camp, and it does work for them to run the world, because my daughters, I absolutely attribute, especially my older daughter, her independence and confidence to going to camp every year. Right. And so I take back that criticism, and I really bring it up because I know you just sent your kid to camp and you might want to debunk all of what I just said. But it is later on, don't the Jewish kids then just, they always stay in touch in that network. It's like your own LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely. Now, look, I mean, it's also we get a month off. We get to have some vacation for our kids.
Nice. All right. The big, bad, beautiful bill, which is I mean, it's so impactful. How do you want us to start with this? You wrote a great piece at MSNBC titled "Trump's Big, quote, beautiful bill will end America's time as a great power. The legislation guts America's long-term economic competitiveness, and that's just the start." How does it gut our economic competitiveness? Why would a bunch of capitalists vote against America's economic competitiveness? I think it increases our economic competitiveness because it puts more money in wealthy investors' hands, and then they can invest in all kinds of different projects that make us better and stronger, and everybody gets all boats rise or whatever. I can't do it anymore.
So I wrote a book about this a couple of years ago called Clear and Present Safety, and in the book we argue that the greatest threat to American power is at home, is our domestic policies. That we have a lower standard of living. We have a lower, we have a lower life expectancy. We have higher rates of poverty, higher rates of maternal and infant mortality. We have poor educational outcomes. Our population is less healthy, has less access to health care. And this bill makes those problems worse, right? It actually takes away health care for at least 12 million people. It could be as high as up to 17 million people. But even for those who don't lose health care, you're going to see people who are probably going to get fewer visits to the doctor, have fewer prescriptions filled, maybe don't get preventive care, preventive mammograms that might save their life down the road, things like that. So all those things have an effect on the country's economic competitiveness. There's no way it can't when you're literally having a less healthy population. It also makes it more expensive people to pay for college, which again, another thing that is going to harm.
The bill makes it more expensive for college costs. This bill,
it increases student loan repayments. It cuts certain student loan programs. Mm-hmm. I have to get the numbers on this, but it basically makes it changes the repayment schedules on loans. So people are going to pay more money early on after they were finished from college. It cuts SNAP benefits, which means you've got tens of millions of people, including 8 million kids, who are going to have less food. That has an impact. That has an impact on not just one's physical health, but their mental health. It has an impact on on people's productivity at work. It affects economic productivity. And it's the kind of thing that, makes it harder for people to rise up the economic ladder. It decreases economic mobility, upward mobility, which, by the way, we already rank pretty low when it comes to upward mobility.
Oh, yeah. I had an argument with a guest about that recently. I mean, there's plenty of ways to measure that, and we come out badly in all of them.
Yeah, if you compare us to other Western democracies, other OECD countries, we are usually the bottom when it comes to things like upward mobility. But the last thing is that we are, one of the big – it's really funny because – not funny, it's more sad than anything else, but Trump has been talking about wanting to onshore manufacturing. Well, one of our biggest manufacturing industries in America is clean energy technology.
Yeah, and but did you see that windmill blade flew off the other day and landed on a
so I guess we should just cancel the whole thing. No, but that is a major industry, and this basically just destroys, but devastates the wind and solar industry. And, in the near term, 90% of new energy sources are coming, new home energy is coming from renewables. So you're going to see almost certainly higher energy costs to people. But I was talking to somebody about this who's in this space and said, look, a lot of companies are just going to go overseas. And this is going to be a win for China. So in a major technology of the 21st century, not just wind and solar, but battery manufacturing, the various parts that go into green energy technology, those industries are going to be harmed. And who's going to be helped? China, which has
not only are they taking
investments.
My understanding is in this bill, not only are they taking away the subsidies for renewable energy as much as they can, they're putting in harder barriers for them to exist even without those subsidies. And when you think about like energy, when you think about investment, and I can't imagine another industry where there was such a sure bet Like energy is the industry. Everybody needs energy. It's not like farming, manufacturing tractors or some more specific. I'm not going to say niche because it's a huge, millions of people depend on, Apple computers. Like you don't have to have a computer. Not everybody, but pretty much everybody uses energy. So you would think if the tables were flat and if they were true free markets, you would let the energy that is the most cheap and effective rise at the top, and we're getting there. We're there. We're past.
But we are getting there in part because of government subsidies, right? I mean, we've subsidized the oil and gas industry for generations. Now we're subsidizing.
I think we should. I think government should pick winners and losers, but they don't. But if they did,
they are picking winners and losers. They're picking oil and gas and coal.
Right.
That's what they're picking. They're picking extractive industries, and they're ignoring renewables for largely ideological reasons, not for economic reasons. And things like that, they have an effect. And then I think there's things like I mentioned this in the piece too, but we're talking about cutting huge cuts. And this is not in the bill, but it's also part of what the Trump administration has been doing. Huge cuts in scientific research and development, huge cuts to the NIH, huge cuts to the National Science Foundation, right? So those things have an effect. They have an effect as far as developing, more cutting edge, innovative industries. And beyond that, the immigration stuff, we're basically, this country, as much as people really don't want to acknowledge it, relies on immigration. And who wants to come to America now when you're at such risk of being arrested? Look, the tourism industry. Tourism is a huge industry in America. You've seen already a $12 billion drop-off in tourism revenues because of Trump's policies. All of this has a cumulative effect. And what all of it does is make America weaker and makes it more difficult for America to be a competitive economy in the 21st century. And so when you have a labor force that is unhealthier, that is less educated, that has less opportunity for upward mobility, when you have innovative industries that allow America to become a leader, their subsidies are being cut, they're being devastated while you're investing in industries that are dwindling. Coal. Investing in coal at this point, when everyone knows coal is not only a dirty industry, but isn't really very efficient. It makes no sense. And so when I look at this and I say, and beyond all of that, there's just the effect on our institutions, effect on our values, effect on the things that once made America a unique and great country. I don't really see how we come back from all of this, to be honest.
Is there anything that you see that anyone could have done post-election, given this House and Senate, to derail this bill? Because it's so close to not becoming the law. It still could, right? There's still a chance the House could not.
No chance. I guess there's a chance, right? There is, but every time I see a House Republican say, I'm not sure I'm going to vote for this bill, that's code for I'm going to vote for this bill.
In a normal time and in a normal America, quote normal, if there were free and fair elections in these upcoming midterms, wouldn't it mean that Republicans would lose everywhere as a result of voting for this potentially the worst bill ever?
Yeah, they're going to lose. They're going to lose a lot of seats over this bill.
You think they will in this timeline with this?
Oh, yeah. They're going to lose the House. I shouldn't say for sure, but I would be shocked if they didn't lose the House. Irrespective of this bill, I think they would have lost the House. But with this bill, I think they will definitely lose the House. They probably won't lose the Senate. And it's possible if they lose the House, the Democrats can, use that leverage to get back some of the things that were cut out of this legislation. But I haven't even mentioned, by the way, the $4 trillion in tax cuts that go primarily to the wealthy. You're blowing an enormous hole in the budget. You're decreasing government revenues. How are you going to pay for all the things that we need to pay for in this country, that we need to support? The safety net, healthcare, education, subsidies for new and innovative industries, all the things, resilience against climate change, all the things that, make America unique and great, or used to at least. You can't pay for them. Like,
no, you actually care about
shrinks the government in a way that makes it hard for the government to do the things it needs to do on behalf of the American people. One
of the great frauds and lies perpetuated on Americans is that if you vote for Democrats, it'll create more debt and deficit. It won't. Based on all of history of this country and recent history, it's with Democrats that you end up, because Democrats, they might spend as much, if not more, but they might not. But they are not going to cut all that money coming into the Treasury. They're not going to cut taxes rates on.
Well, they may, but look, they might now. I mean, but I wouldn't count on that. Cutting taxes is difficult. I mean, raising taxes is difficult.
But letting a tax cut expire is not difficult. Right,
but that's right. It's not, but that's what's happened. That's what motivated this legislation. Look, I think the other thing is that, I just it's hard to see how you come back from this even in 4 years, because the cumulative damage that Trump is doing to the country. I saw a piece today. They're basically refusing to provide education funding for after school programs. I mean, who the fuck? First of all, who the fuck does that?
Well, that'll be a direct result. Create more crime because when you don't have a place for young people to be after school, they will get in trouble. And I'm speaking from personal experience. That's when I got arrested, legitimately, because after school, lacrosse didn't start till 4 p.m. Talk about a white thing to say. Well, guess what? We went mailbox bashing that day. And it's true all over the country. There's all kinds of data on this, sociological data, that if you have places for young people to be and go and to do things, they're less likely to get into trouble.
Yeah. But also after school programs for a lot of these kids is essential. They need these.
Sure, of course.
And from an educational standpoint, from an athletic standpoint, all these things.
Nobody cares about their education, their inner city or wherever they are, as long as they stay out of trouble and don't commit crimes. But if you cared about crime, like they say they do, and you wanted to reduce crime, you would have places for young people to be. Period. That's a great investment.
But my point is, like, they're cutting these programs. I mean, it's really hard to see how America comes back from all of this. And I wrote in the piece that we're committing national suicide. It's truly what I believe. And I want to say one thing though before I go. Like you said a second ago, you want to talk about stuff that affects people the most. And I hate to say this, but part of me,
Zionism.
No, that's not what I was going to say. Part of me just wonders, at what point do I run out of empathy on this? Personally, like, I live in a blue state. Okay, sure, my next mayor, it might be an anti-Zionist, but ultimately I'm going to be fine. I have enough resources, and I'm not going to get affected by Medicaid cuts. I'm not going to be affected by cuts to SNAP, the food stamp program. I may pay more for my health insurance, but I can probably handle that. The people who are going to be hurt the most are people, to be honest with you, who voted for this president, people in red states. They're going to be hurt the most by this because the safety nets already suck in red states.
Aren't they making accommodations for red states? Aren't they making the penalties and the consequences less?
Only for Alaska, because Lisa Murkowski.
It's like everybody says that the rural red state hospitals are going to go out of business, but didn't they create a fund just
$25 billion compared to $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts.
So it's still going to, okay. So
it's like taking a teacup to take water out of the ocean.
Your point about empathy though is what? What is your concern? That you don't care about?
I kind of don't care. I do care, but part of me sort of felt like, why am I outraged? Why do I care? The people who voted for this, people it affects. Like, I have empathy for them to a degree, but at some point I'm sort of like, I think it brings a sort of selfishness. Like, this is what you wanted this, you got it.
Yeah, I can't.
hate feeling that way, but part of me kind of does.
The way that I understand that, I think that's normal. I think a lot of people would go a lot further. The defense for that, in my mind, is it's more complex in that not all these people. A lot of people believe shit that isn't true. And when I think about the guys who sacked the Capitol on January 6th, I think a lot of them, my extra empathy is that they really believed that Trump got cheated and that they were doing something important and patriotic because they believed their president was telling them the truth. And I think I have empathy for people's ignorance and lack of understanding about history and politics and everything, especially in this country where we don't teach it. So I have a certain amount of empathy that people just never really had an opportunity to know or learn the truth. And
yeah, I don't. I'm out of it. I'm done because you know what? It's not. Look, the first time Trump won, I could see that argument. But the second time, after we went through 4 years of the Michigas, like if you didn't understand that he was a friggin' disaster, this was going to happen, then then it's your fault. It's not my fault. This might sound a little racist, but I guess I have less empathy for like the conservative, like Venezuelans and Cubans who are being deported now. Like, how did they not know that like, why would they think that he was going to somehow not look at their community? Or the Iranians. Who are being
probably because they believe and know that the vast majority of Cuban or Venezuelan or whatever Haitian immigrants are not criminals, and so he's not going to deport people who aren't criminals.
What did you think mass deportation, the signs that were held up the RNC, what do you think that meant?
I think it
didn't say mass deportations of criminals, it said mass deportations. And I guess what's bothering me a little bit is that I part of me feels like, I'm not going to lose abortion rights for my kids. I'm not going to lose these things that people are going to lose if they voted for. And at some point, it almost feels like people need to see how bad this is before they realize what they've done. But then again, we saw it for 4 years when he was president the first time, and they did it again. So yeah. I hate feeling this way, but my whole what I do for a living, I do because things piss me off, and then I write about them. And it does, after a while, feel like, how can I be more pissed off about your plight than you are?
Yeah, but I think you do it for other reasons, I'm sure you would admit. And I think I do it to fight apathy. So I want to fight ignorance and apathy by talking about it.
How's that working out?
I'm winning. I just won. Yeah. I got this. I just got this. So I held up a trophy. I won.
I'm being serious, man. Like I
don't think
a crisis of conscience yesterday that I just felt like, I can't. Part of me just thinks that I have to worry more about my own mental health, my own sanity. I read these stories about these people who lived for 20 years getting deported, and it just like it breaks my heart and depresses me. At some point, I just want to shut it off. I don't want to talk about it.
And you should, so you can come back to fight the next day. You should.
Yeah, I guess you're right, but it gets harder and harder the more you see.
It does, but I mean, like, I think when I say, you said, how is it working, fighting apathy? It's working for the people that are paying attention. And it doesn't mean it's the most people or that we are, quote, winning. But I mean, I've been doing this since 2008, trying to fight apathy and talk about important issues and learn myself about these. And sometimes it's not about keeping score of winning or losing. Sometimes it's just about creating a space like you do and like I tried to do to remind people that they're not alone in their thinking about the cruelty.
No, I hear that. I hear that. Absolutely.
Critical thinking and morality and Zionism.
I hear that. Always about Zionism. Always about the Jews.
Always about the Jews. Everything is about the Jews in my life. Even Christmas.
You're probably surrounded by Jews where you live.
I mean, I don't. It's like I have a hard time personally with anti-Semitism because.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. That bothers
that's the end of my statement. No, because honestly, it sounds so cliche or whatever, but like there are so many people who are Jewish that I'm so close with in my life, and the same is true of Black and brown folks. Like I struggle with it because I always think about the person that's not in the room. And so when I hear people say things and do things, I have a lot of people in my life that I'm very close with. And when I think about people who are, identify as many of my closest circle of friends are Jewish. And so we're not as close anymore because of October 7th. So
really?
No, but I do feel a distance with certain people. I do sometimes wonder, even though, I actually don't have.
Is that because of the Free Palestine sign you put up on your house? Is that why?
It's because of my From the River to the Sea t-shirts I'm selling.
By the way, I want to point out, technically, you did basically suggest some of your best friends are Jews.
But that's what I said. I don't want to sound cliche, but like, don't you think that if you have close people in your life or family who are of a certain, who are gay or black or brown, who are Jewish, like it's, you then have more empathy for anybody who's struggling. If you had a close loved one or a child who had cerebral palsy, you would think a lot more about that issue. If you don't,
that's an interesting thing. Like, I don't have a lot of friends in my life who are Muslim. I have a few, but
that's shocking to me.
I have a few. But, okay. Hey, I once had a girlfriend who was two actually who were Muslim.
No, I don't. But I don't think.
But here's the thing. It doesn't mean that I don't care about Islamophobia. You know, I mean, I don't have friends of mine who are undocumented immigrants. I still care about undocumented immigrants because I have empathy for them. And this is something like I hear from Republicans a lot. Like this sort of, I remember like Rob Portman's like the best example is Rob Portman was opposed to same-sex marriage for most of his political career. He's a former senator from Ohio. Then his son comes out, and all of a sudden he supports same-sex marriage. And I was like, I'm like, you want a medal for that? Like, you're just doing this because somebody you know. Like, you should have held this way beforehand. Yeah. I find it like really bizarre when people sort of say like, I feel because some of in my life or my family. I'll tell you one more story. I have to go, but one more story.
I don't agree with that because you could say that, and I've heard that about like caring about women and girls. Like you only care about women and girls because you have daughters.
No, that's not why.
No, but I care more about them because I have daughters. Because I wouldn't.
No, but these are people who literally like were supporting things that actually hurt gay people. So I'll sort of tell. When I used to work on the Hill, like 30 years ago, I worked for Chris Dodd, and they voted on the Defense of Marriage Act, which was legislation in the 90s. Basically, said the federal government would not acknowledge or recognize any state that legalized same-sex marriage. And every Republican, of course, voted for it, and most Democrats did. But Chuck Robb, a senator from Virginia, gets up on the floor of the Senate and gives this impassioned speech opposing it. And I remember we were all sitting around like, Chuck, he's senator from Virginia, back when Virginia was still a red state. And, we sort of like, what's going on here? And I remember we were like, maybe he's got a gay son or gay daughter, or maybe he has a, gay friend or gay whatever. So years later, I interviewed him. I wrote a piece about this. And I asked him, like, why did he do it? I said, did you have any friend in your life who was gay? He's like, no. I said, so why? He's like, because it was the right thing to do. Because it just seemed wrong to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I was like, wow, what a crazy notion. And he actually ended up in part losing his Senate seat because of that vote. But we should just hold these views because it's the right thing to do. Like,
we don't, but who
because it's wrong.
How do you learn right from wrong in life? I think that's the question. Like, people don't. How do you learn that? You only learn that through a certain experience, lesson.
Well, I think what bothers me is a lot of liberals learn what I just said. They understand homophobia is wrong. They understand Islamophobia is wrong. But when anti-Semitism happens, they make excuses for it.
Well, because
I think it's really fascinating that our Senator Kirsten Gillibrand had to apologize for saying something about Mamdani, suggesting he supports global jihad, and all of his supporters like basically picketed at her Senate office, and she had to apologize. He doesn't have to apologize for continuing to say that he has no problem with this globalized intifada.
I don't know about that. She should have to apologize for voting for Andrew Cuomo based on her record against sexual harassment and rape and sexual assault. She should that lost me with her.
That's a different issue. I mean, you have a point there, but that's a different issue.
Wait, are you pro?
Why is Islamophobia something that we have to condemn and people have to apologize for, but anti-Semitism something that's like, that's fine. You're just being. I saw someone today say, that's just mass hysteria. Hysterical about. I'm just being hysterical because I'm bothered by the mayor of my city who won't condemn a phrase that's been used to justify anti-Semitic violence. I mean, we don't count. Jews don't count, and anti-Semitism doesn't count in the same way it does for other prejudices and other forms of discrimination. Well,
you'll be the last Jewish guest I have on for a while. I was going to say, like, I don't know. I was going to. You said enough.
That's a good one, man. You should be a comedian or something, honestly.
Hey, I'm vetting all future guests. Like, just be clear. Is your mother religious?
Can you pull your pants down? I want to just check that out really quick.
You think there's? I have a bunch of listeners saying, and I pushed back again. They were all against me that with the whole trans everything in sports that we're gonna have an atmosphere where at some point parents from the stands or other coaches are going to demand that for a genital check, like on the field or in the
there's already talk about doing that.
Yeah.
There's already states have already I think pushed that legislation.
I think it would be so unbelievably gross for a coach or a parent to be like, check that kid's pant. Like, wow, that's so fucking weird. Like you get a physical to play the sport. We know what your gender is. It's not lied about.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think, there's lots of issues around trans sports and trans, treatments for kids.
Oh, shut up, Vicky is the chat. One of the people who's arguing with me just said, told you. She's like literally right there. She's on my shoulder throughout my whole life. She's like, told you.
Told you what?
On the live chat, I told you that I was with listeners the other night who were making this argument. She, I think, was one of them. And she just said, told you. She just got me good. But you were saying, sorry.
No, I just I understand. Look, I'm very close to this issue. I'm not going to get into details about it when it comes to gender issues, especially trans health issues with kids. But the sheer hatred that's being directed at trans America, like this guy Jessica Riedel, who's an economist who just went to the Dispatch. He basically was what was his name? I forget his name before. He used to identify as a man, now identifies as a woman. And you had people just attacking him, members of Congress, just because of the fact that he identifies as a woman. It's just there is we've gotten to a point now where like these kinds of prejudices have become so prevalent. I mean, it's just this is back to the beginning of the conversation about the immigration stuff. I'm getting on. I'm sort of going all over the place here, but I was struck by. Around Mamdani, especially, Republicans on the House were basically openly suggesting, because he's a Muslim, that he supported 9/11 or that he would commit jihad, or Marjorie Green putting out these posts with a burqa over the Statue of Liberty. We've gotten to this point now where like this kind of discrimination has become it's not even notable anymore, right? Tommy Tuberville the other day. There was a piece in the Post about this, about how prevalent this has become, the racism on the Hill. And the kicker, the last sentence was like, Tommy Tuberville, Senator from Alabama, comparing legal immigrants to vermin. And it was like the last sentence of the piece. That would have been a major story 5-10 years ago. Now it's afterthought.
He called them inner city rats.
Yeah. I mean, it is the prevalence of this kind of talk. And so I think, look, it's all over the place. But I think what's troubling to me is that you see this from the right, but what's happening on the left is this troubling acceptance of anti-Semitism in a way that I don't think I've ever seen before in my lifetime. And if I point this out, what people say to me? Oh, criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitism. Well, that's not even nothing to do with Israel. Globalizing Intifada doesn't do with Israel. It's to do with Jews in America. Like, I'm not even going to defend what Israel does. I'm talking about Jews in America. And Jews in America have a right to be concerned about a mayor who won't condemn that kind of a phrase. Yeah, that's a problem.
I know.
And yet we're dismissed for it. But again, this is a left-wing phenomenon. I think on the right, it's become every kind of prejudice has become just no longer even forbidden. It's just
openly, overtly racist.
Overtly racist.
Outside of policies that will affect Black and brown people's lives directly and specifically, which there are plenty, the most overtly racist thing you could do, I think, outside of like directly being racist to somebody, is rename military bases after Confederate generals. Like, to me, that's so unbelievably overt. No,
I wrote about this Harvey Milk thing.
Yes,
they renamed this oiler ship
that's
Harvey Milk
day, like
Pride Week. During Pride Week,
Pride Week is bad, but renaming bases after Confederate generals is worse because they were Confederates.
Well, they've done it. They're not renaming them after
whatever. Don't even say it out loud what they're really doing. Right? It's even worse that they're doing that. They're renaming them after.
But even they understand, like, you can't name it after Robert E. Lee.
But no one's going to know that. No one's going to understand that. And it's like it's such a gross, unbelievably gross thing.
No, it is. I have no disagreement. It's disgusting.
All right. Well, speaking of dismissing Jews, I have to let you go.
Speaking of kicking Jews to the curb, get out of here, Cohen.
No more Jews this month. I love that I'm committing. I'm just
listen. I want to say for your viewers, for the record, I'm laughing at Pete because I know that he is joking, and so we can joke around like this. But that's the whole point here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Mike. I think I've had a long enough career. I've interviewed. Here's like closest to a Jewish friend. I've interviewed Jonathan Green. I have Jonathan Greenblatt's cell number. Okay, all right.
Listen, as I said before, some of your best friends are Jews.
Some of my best friends are Jews. I hooked up
his
with
lawyer, his podiatrist, his accountant.
I had intimate relations with a very religious Jewish woman when I was young.
Really? Did you?
And she told me she felt guilty because I wasn't Jewish. And during the intimacy, right when we were getting it going in her apartment, her ceiling fan like just fritzed out and broke. And I was like, oh my God, you are right. God is pissed that you're with a goy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You agree with this girl from 30 years ago.
I think she was on to something. God was angry. He got angry that day.
All right, bud. This is awesome. Really appreciate you very much. Keep up the good work. Everybody go subscribe to Michael's Substack right now. Truth and Consequences. Go read his MSNBC piece. Go follow him on all the places. Blue Sky, Twitter. What else? You're starting a new podcast too. Do you want to talk about that?
A couple new podcasts, actually. I'll have more.
All right. Well, we'll promote the hell out of them.
All
right. There he goes. Michael Cohen.
Right,
go subscribe to Truth and Consequences. Substack.com. Read him at the MSNBC, the Daily Beast. Let him know that you heard him here as always. Let me know what you liked, did not like, agreed with, disagreed with at any point during that interview. I'd love to hear back from you on it. And look forward to talking to you about it and everything else that we're doing. Thanks again for all of your feedback this week and lately. It's been super appreciated, and I'm very grateful to have you listening and supporting and reading the daily email, enjoying the vitamin N, and all the benefits of membership with the Stand Up with Pete Dominick community. Sign up now if you haven't. Upgrade if you can. Your weekly or rather monthly pledge at the end of the month. I always lose a few subscribers because credit cards expire, so check on that if you haven't. Make sure that you're being billed. Sorry I have to say that, but it sucks to lose people that way. Okay, that's all. That's all I've got for you. Thank you very much for listening today. I should be back tomorrow. John Carroll is here with me every day in spirit and on the show and in real life because I just texted him. Listen to this album, this new album that he's just downloaded, johncarroll.org, to go download it right now. Give it a rating and review along with this podcast. And that's it. I'll talk to you tomorrow, I hope. Bye-bye.